Hey guys, today I'm going to take you through a deadlift tutorial. They're often given a bad rap for injuring people's back, when in reality, they're actually the best exercise to strengthen your back and posture if done right. So I'm going to take you through that today. Alright, so the first thing we're going to look at today before we even touch the bar is making sure that you're bracing and you're breathing. So a lot of times when we first start out lifting, we're told to breathe in on the way down and breathe out on the way up. Now that's a good place to start with resistance. But when we're working with heavy weights, we want to treat each rep as an individual rep. So you want to take a big, deep breath in and fill your diaphragm with as much air as possible. Hold that breath during the rep, then breathe out and take another breath for each single rep. This is going to ensure that you have maximal tightness within your core and you're resisting the weight and having the strongest movement possible. Okay, so now we're going to look at the setup. A lot of times people end up trying to squat their weight on a deadlift, so they have their feet out quite wide, which means your hands have to go out even wider. You want to have your feet pretty much right underneath your shoulders, pretty close together, and your hands want to go just outside your legs, because the closer your hands are to your feet, the more upright torso you can have, which takes the strain off your lower back. So we go down, you have your feet shoulder width apart, and I want you to bend at your waist when going down to the bar. Instead of with your knees, remember the deadlift is a hip hinge exercise. We're focusing on using our big muscles of our hips, our hamstrings, and our lower back. So you don't want to be going down to the bar bending at your knees. You want to bend with your hips, go down to the bar. You're going to have your hands either side of your feet. Like we said, you want to take a big deep breath in. And from there, you want to think of pulling your chest up. If you have a big chest up, that's going to help with keeping your back nice and straight. So you want to have your chest up and you want to flex your lats to keep nice and tight. So you've got tightness through everything. And the next step is taking the tension out of the bar. You can probably hear a little click there. And that's because there's a bit of space between the weight plates and the barbell to make it easier to put the weight plates on. Now what you want to do is make sure you take the tension out of the bar before you lift. That little click is the sound of the barbell clicking up into the weights. You don't want to lift the weight from a relaxed position, because that's a big jolt on your lower back. That's where people often injure their lower back. So another cue is you want to make sure that you pull the weight or the slack out of the bar before you even attempt to lift the weight. So as you go down, you set up your big breath in, you've got your chest up, you want to flex your lats and taking that tension out of the bar as you hear. So I take that tension and from there, I lift. I don't want to go down and go that tension with heavier weights. That's going to be an injury cause to my back. So you want to make sure all the tension is out of that bar. And you want to have the biggest deep breath in. Imagine somebody's going to punch you in the guts. You take a big deep breath in and you be aware for when they're about to punch you. So, and brace with your abs. That's what you want to do. Now you want to treat each rep as its own individual rep in your sets. So every single time you want to reset and make sure you do everything right. You go down, hold on to the bar, take your big deep breath in, chest up, flex your lats and pull your butt down so your back's nice and straight, chest up, lift the weight up, nice, big and tall. Go down, another breath, reset, start again. Now, when it comes to lowering the weight, it's dependent on what your goal is. If we're looking for maximal strength, we just want to focus on the concentric and lifting as much weight as possible. So lift the weight up and then lower the weight as fast as possible while still being controlled. Don't just drop it. Whereas if your goal is looking to build as much muscle as possible, you want to slow the eccentric and control the weight on the way down to help create as much muscle damage as possible to help build as much muscle as possible. Alright, so now I want to show you from the side what it looks like to make sure you have a straight back, because often people are lifting with a rounded back, which is where injury is going to come into it. So if we take the same setup as before, feet right underneath yourself, hands bending at your waist first, coming down, hands just outside your feet. From there, you'll see that my back's quite rounded now. This is not a good place to lift from, but we haven't finished setting up yet. So you take your big deep breath in, chest up, butt down, flex your lats. Now my back's looking in a much better position to lift. From here, tension's out of the bar and up. Nice straight back. Again, if you want lowering nice and slow, if you're trying to build as much muscle as possible, down to your starting position. And from there, big deep breath again and up. That's what it should look like, keeping a nice straight back the whole time. This leads into one of the biggest mistakes I see people do all the time with the deadlift, which is how they're trying to squat the weight. So you can see it really easy from the side that a lot of times people end up trying to set themselves up with the bar way too far forward. Instead of loading up with their hips, they bend with their knees and they end up in a position like this. Now you can still have your back nice and straight, but you'll notice my knees are very bent in this position. When I go to lift, if we use all the other same cues, we can have a nice straight back and not too bad a movement. The problem with this is we're pretty much squatting the weight. We're focusing on using our quads a lot more than we are our hips. So your weight is going to be on your toes, pulling you forward, and your shins are quite far forward and creating quite a big angle at the knee. So the larger the angle at the knee, the more you're going to recruit your quads. If you look how we've been setting up before, and the technique I'm showing you is if we bend at the hips first, come a bit closer to the bar. As I come down over the bar, you will notice I'm all the way down at the bar, but my shins are still vertical. They're not leaning forward like they were before, like this. A general rule of thumb is the more vertical your shins, the more you're going to recruit your glutes and hamstrings instead of your quads. So that's why you want to make sure you're closer to the bar and you want to keep your weight mainly on your heels. You should always have your big toe, your little toe, and your heel in contact with the ground. You shouldn't be hovering either way, but predominantly your weight should be in your heels and keeping your weight back. So again, I'll quickly show you. We go down, bending at the waist, just outside your feet. Big breath in, shins nice and vertical, tension out of the bar, stand up straight. So now I want to address quickly your feet, because that's basically the only thing you've got contacting the ground and all your force is going to be going through them. So it's actually quite important what you do with your feet. You're probably not ever thinking about that though. What you want to make sure is you want to almost think of you're trying to grab the ground. As you can see with my toes here, I'm pulling and trying to grip onto the ground. What I'm doing here is keeping most of my weight in the heels, but I'm still holding onto the ground to make sure I have tension in my big toe, my little toe, and my heel. I also want to try and keep most of the weight to the outside of my foot. I don't want my feet and arches collapsing and my knees will jut in if that happens. That's going to put a lot of tension on your knees and it's a very bad idea. This cue is exactly the same for squats. You want to have big toe, little toe, and heel on the ground, gripping the floor and keeping the weight to the outside so your knees are pushing out a bit. This has helped to activate your glutes, but it's also going to make you much stronger and a safer position. Okay guys, so now I'm just going to explain the main big things I see wrong and probably the things you're doing wrong with your deadlift, and to show you why it's going to be not as efficient as what I've just shown you. So when they're setting up for a deadlift, a lot of times people have their feet out wider, which means your hands go out wider. So if I simply will over exaggerate what's happening, but show you, if I go out wider, and I'm just going to grab super wide for an example, you notice how much more I have to be bent over here. I'm not very upright, which means I'm going to put a lot more stress on my lower back. As I bring my hands in, my chest comes up, taking the stress off my back. Now, of course, the closer I have my feet, the closer I can bring my hands in and my chest comes up much higher than it is if I have to grip out wide. So that's one reason why you want to make sure your feet and your hand grip are inside. If you go into sumo deadlift, that's a whole nother story and I can do a video on that. But if we're doing the regular deadlift, you want to have your feet underneath your shoulders and then you want to be gripping your hands just outside of your feet for the strongest grip. Again, I'll talk about squatting from this angle. So if you're too far back and the bar's at the top of your toes, when you go down, you end up putting all your weight forward with your shins forward, and as you pick up the bar, you're squatting the bar. And there's a lot of weight through your toes, which means there's a lot of weight on your quads. And you see how much more I have to lean forward. If you stand in line with the bar, ideally, if you've got shoes on, where your laces start at your shoes is a good point to have the bar. When you look straight down, the bar should be straight over your laces is a good point. If you don't have shoes on, somewhere around where your toes end would be a pretty good point to start. That means when you look straight down, the bar's covering just where your toes end. That's going to give you a good point to give you enough room to have your shoulders over the bar, but to keep your weight back on your hips. Another reason why you may be wondering why I'm not wearing shoes when I deadlift, or it's ideal you see a lot of people to not wear shoes, is when you're deadlifting, you start to use really heavy weights. You don't want to be in running shoes with an elevated heel and a compression within that heel, because as soon as you go to lift weights, like taking the tension out of the bar, there's going to be some tension within your shoe that has to be taken away. So ideally, having a very strong flat surface is best. So lifting in, say, Converse All-Stars or any shoe that has a real minimal cushioning is ideal. If you can lift barefoot, that's awesome. Just don't cut your toes off with a weight plate. All right, guys, hopefully this deadlift video has been really helpful for you all. Fixing up your form may add some kilos to your deadlifts and definitely transform your body. Once you start doing it right, it's the best thing to remove back pain and improve your posture, if done right. If done wrong, yes, you'll end up with injuries, but following the guide in this video is going to make your deadlift so much better and it's going to give you some amazing results. So hopefully it was helpful. If you have any more questions, comment below and I'm happy to help you out and answer them for you. I would like you to please like and share the video so you can get around and more people can know how to deadlift properly so we can keep people pain-free and getting better results. So I'll catch you all in my next video, guys. See you then.